Sir Jeffrey.
Hello. How's it going?
You're good. How you doing, man?
Good, good. It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a minute. I haven't seen you since January.
Yeah.
Hi.
What's up?
When I first opened that, there were a whole bunch of people, and then it reduced to 3.
Oh, was it from like a prior meeting?
Oh, maybe. I guess so.
Maybe you like had some in memory, phone call.
Maybe, but like just moments. It would have been because like moments ago I was on a one-on-one call with someone, so it wasn't in memory on mine. But maybe from last time I logged into this Zoom.
Saying a thing.
Jeez.
Yeah, Jeff, how you been?
Good. Real busy.
How's the traffic?
Yeah. Yeah, trying to publish a paper. I don't know, in the next couple weeks.
Apparently it's from the Enspiral. It was developed on the
I hear Liz.
Yeah, I hear Liz too. That's amazing. That's definitely right. What's up, dude? And Jess, so good to see you. Joining us from, it's late. What time is it where you are?
It's not too bad. It's 10 o'clock, but I'm in a hotel bar, so
Nice.
try and keep it muted.
Nice.
Very classy.
Hi, Brett. How are you?
Hi, doing well. How are all of you?
Good.
Yeah.
I know Matt Price is gonna join us late because he has a class that finishes at 5, and PatCon is also gonna join us late. But let's give it a couple minutes to see if anyone else might jump on this call. I feel like maybe Mike Huka said he would be here potentially. So yeah, we can talk. I just wanted to say we got a few minutes.
Cool. Well, actually, Ray had a late addition to the agenda. Did you see that, Don? By chance?
I don't know where I was supposed to look.
Oh, sorry. It was in the Slack channel.
Yeah, it was in
Ray, go
the
ahead.
Data Together Slack channel.
Where did it go? Okay, so what? Can you tell me what it was? Sorry, I'm like I am not seeing.
Basically, I just wanted to give like a quick update on like web monitoring development, community outreach, and start figuring out how we can best work with Data Together, because there's some overlap, but the overlaps and the distinctions aren't always 100% clear. And then also, this might be a longer conversation, but anything that I can do from like the web monitoring project, as the software project manager to help that stuff along, we can start those conversations too, and trying to, wrangle those conversations to get going. And this might be a good opportunity when we know we're all going to be here.
Cool. Yeah. So I added it under discussion topics, but we had also kind of had a few pressing items that we wanted to spend a little bit of time discussing and working on together. And so I'd like to keep those at the top of the agenda just to make sure we have that time. But I think we could have at least a piece of that conversation today and get the update, which would be great. And we have a partners update section, so maybe I could ask you to do a very succinct version of the update there. And then, yeah, I think some portion of that, but maybe not the in-depth conversation would be perfect.
Yeah, so I just gave like 80% of it, and I can just fill in everything else when we get there. So yeah, this is just like the seed to get the conversation rolling.
That's great. How's everybody doing? Good. Liz has got a cool shirt on. I think it's pretty cool.
Innovation.
It's Monday, but it feels like Wednesday.
You know how like TV people or whatever do like certain makeup like for that format? I have realized that low poly graphic patterns play well for group video conferences, and I am playing it.
It's good if you have like bad bandwidth and everything starts getting pixelated because it's already pre-pixelated.
Phenomenal.
I like the like one color to kind of like give that like weird shallowness vibe. That's my preferred video conference look.
Liz, do your fashion decisions get like more aggressive while you're teaching the course at Parsons? Like by osmosis, you're just like thinking more strategically about clothing.
I mean, I do have a drop waist neoprene dress with a Donkey Kong print on it, and I feel that that's aggressive.
Love it.
That's pretty phenomenal. On that note, let's start a
Yeah.
very official
Yeah.
meeting.
We're all trying to process that still, and I've seen it. So
Amazing. Yeah, so let's get started. And sorry, I feel like I was slightly confusing, and I've just noticed, Liz, the agenda item you put below, but I had kind of slotted it in slightly at a different point in the agenda. So we're going to have that conversation, but I think we're going to start just with a bit of an intro updates recap, and then we could maybe have the conversation before we're moving into some of the key aspects we wanted to work and hopefully reach some decisions about today. So yeah, the first thing is nice to see you all again, only a month after seeing you the last time, and new faces, which is always welcome. So we wanted to start with an intro if there are new people on the call. So there are, so let's all just do a brief intro of our names and maybe just maximum one sentence, kind of like where you're coming from and why you're at this call. And then I wanted to just give a very quick, but it's also written recap of where we got to in our last kickoff coordinating call, and then move into kind of what we were hoping to accomplish today. So maybe I'll just say people in the order I see them on my screen. So Brendan. Oh, and I'll say me first, so I won't go. My name's Dawn, I'm in Toronto, and I guess I'm coming at Data Together from the Edgy side of stuff. So I see Brendan and then Jeff.
Awesome. My name is Brendan. I'm in New York, but I'm originally from Canada, and I'm coming at it from the Edgy and the Query side.
Hey, I'm Jeff. I'm in Boston, originally from Michigan. I have been a little bit offline for the last couple months, but through the Edgy side, mainly on Python-related projects.
The next people I see are Matt Zed and Jess.
Hey, I'm Matt Zumwalt. I work with Protocol Labs and on the IPFS project. And yeah, that's what I do.
Hi, I'm Jess. I'm a PhD student at University of Southampton in the UK, expat living abroad, studying web archiving. And so I'm working with Edgy on various things and getting started in web monitoring with them, actually. But I'm interested in see what's going on with Data Together as well.
And then Ray and Britt.
Hi, I'm Ray. I'm the software project manager for the web monitoring project at Edgy. But before that, I was doing some archiving and scraping and spending a lot of time in Boston. So I've been hanging out with the Boston group, like hi, Jeff and Eben. It's good to see you guys. And I split my time between Brooklyn and Baltimore.
Hi everyone, I'm Britt. I am at UCLA here in sunny Southern California, but you wouldn't be able to tell it by my thick clothing. Our heater's broken today. You wouldn't imagine that you need it. And I work with Edgy on a number of things, but I am on this call because I'm writing my dissertation on data infrastructures, and so I'm looking to maybe include something about data together in one of my chapters. So thanks.
And then PatCon, Liz, and Eben.
I'll jump in. Yeah, I'm Patrick. Ooh, sorry, a little bit of echo. And I have been with Edgy doing contract work for a while. I've been a little bit at a distance lately, but still interested in showing up and being helpful where I can be. And I'm in Toronto. I'm actually right beside Dawn, and sometimes in New York City.
And I'm Liz Barry. Been part of Edgy for the past year, also part of Public Lab, and I'm in Brooklyn next to Ray.
And I'm Eben. I'm in environmental science in Boston, not near Jeff. And I've been part of the Boston Data Rescue and then Data Together.
Awesome. Okay, so on the Google Doc, under intro section, there was just a recap, which has a link to our January meeting notes. And the two parts I just wanted to pull out, so we kind of kept them in our mind as we went through this call, is the kind of what our goal was for like what we want to talk about, and we didn't reach all of those decisions. We kind of more like got the ball rolling on them last time, and so those we're really thinking about. I think having more regular partner updates, establishing a meeting schedule. We've sort of done a bit of that scheduling, thinking a little bit about our communications, how we bring more people in, and we sort of ended on a bit of a brainstorm about the next 6 months. And so I pulled those notes in here just because I think we were hoping to not exactly totally make that roadmap today, but at least have the process for understanding how we would do it, because our goal is really to focus on the decision-making process and sort of our communications channels. But the next 6 month projects we identified tentatively were a webinar, maybe to introduce Data Together to people, thinking a bit about project scoping. I think we've had, sort of an ongoing conversation about, and I use this language, but this isn't maybe quite accurate, but sort of whether we're more of a big tent or a little bit more tech driven, and thinking about how that would inform, ongoing conversations like licensing and sort of this reference implementation Data Together node that we've been using for distributed archiving. And then the EDGI MOU has sort of come up as like a task from EDGI side that would really be good to tackle at some point. I didn't know exactly how to synthesize this, but Liz had mentioned something about participatory design approach. So maybe sort of us understanding what our approach would be to be more participatory, to involve people. Some of that was linked to identifying use cases and maybe how we could model use cases of a Data Together way of being with data, a way of being together with data. And then ending with sort of thinking about coalitions around other people who are interested in sort of really changing how the internet is operating, and also identifying potential allies in that. And we had sort of ended with open questions, which I probably could have deleted that bullet point because I moved them below. That was not very helpful. And so the to-dos that we had listed were here as well. So we set up a private Google Drive to store the off-camera notes. If there's anything between partners that we didn't think could be publicly announced at that moment, that's where they could be stored. We also were hoping today to review a proposal on decision-making, and then also a proposal on sort of what a non-coordinating call, because we hope that these would happen once a quarter, would look like as a way to keep in touch more frequently. Then we sort of set the next 2 coordinating calls, so this one and then one in March, which will be the ones for the first quarter of 2018. And then we all made it to this partners meeting. That's great. And sort of on the horizon, this was the larger licensing convo about Query. So that happened a couple weeks ago, and there was a recorded version, which is also on YouTube. So the open questions or on the horizon aspect of last meeting was things that have already been mentioned, but also that there is potentially an upcoming decentralized web summit in SF, and there had been one that was hosted in 2016, and Matt Zommel, I think you were there, and definitely like IPFS was there, but you had flagged we may want to think about what Data Together's role could be in that. And then I put this on as a thing I think we had talked about at some point, but just to revisit this conversation, I think this is timely given who is on the call, of like thinking about supporting PhD research from EDGI side, so Britt and Jess. Cool, and I kind of built more time if we wanted to. I'm not sure what this would look like if we wanted to kind of do another quick round of partner updates. It sounds like we got some EDGI stuff. I'm looking at you, Ray. But maybe we could to go around again, and I don't remember what an order was last time, so I'm just gonna say, could we start with a query a brief update. So like a couple minutes if you think there's something you want to share. No obligation.
I don't want to share anything. I'm just kidding. Yes, sure. I'm going to make it quicker so that Ray can have more time. We dropped version 0.1, and which I'm very, very proud of and thankful for everybody who helped us get there. We had the licensing conversation. We decided with GPL version 3.0 for the project, which I've been getting a lot of really good feedback from everybody that we've sort of raised the issue with. So very thankful to all of you for having that discussion with us. Yeah, it's coming along quite nicely. We're releasing 0.1.1 today, and starting the next 2 or 3 weeks, we'll actually have our front end come back online. So now you can, more and more people can participate in using Query for this stuff. Yeah, excited to talk more about reference implementation, but things are going well. We got people that aren't us starring us on GitHub, which is like a whole new experience. So thank you to all of you. That's our big update.
That's so wonderful. Matt said, can I put you on the spot for a Protocol Labs one?
Yeah, the Protocol Labs things that are relevant to this group. We are looking very proactively at forming a GLAM, Galleries, Libraries, Archives, and Museums group within Protocol Labs, the group's title would be GLAM and Data Together. So we would be forming a whole group whose purpose of existence includes this collaboration. So that would be great in terms of us getting to have people proactively day by day contributing to this. Also, well, you'll get the update on, we've done some stuff on an RFC process for the IPFS project in libp2p, so we could potentially also use that for Data Together, or tweak it and use it for Data Together. And then we also are looking at, we have a junior product, someone who's trying to build her skills as a product owner. One of the things we've thought of assigning to her would be doing like product requirements analysis for the code base that Data Together has created for Edgy. Basically, like, what exactly is this thing that we built? Why is it built that way? What are the features and functionality that Edgy needs and why? And what does a 1.0 win look like? So it seemed like a good assignment to give to her for a lot of reasons, and I'm curious whether it would be useful for whether our partners would be happy to see that document come into existence. So that's my update.
Awesome. Just as a flag, is someone else able to maybe help join on notes? I'm not able to do fill in when other people who are note taking are talking as well as I would like right now.
Great. I can go back to note taking. I totally dropped the ball when I started talking. But,
I'll do it. I'll do it.
Great. Well, let's let you two duke it out.
Oh, I also have a minor update about the DWeb Summit. Should that wait till later?
Share it now.
I've been hammering Wendy at the Internet Archive with basically for a while, it was like every 4 days, I sent her the name and contact information for another woman who she should either feature or ask to be an advisor to the conference. And I'm basically just pushing really, really hard for that conference, for the objective of the conference to be massively broadening the set of people who look at the decentralized web and see a place for themselves. And she seems increasingly receptive to that. So that's the update on that one, and we'll see where it goes.
And there's still no date for that, right? Or is there?
No date at all. I mean, like, she still hasn't even settled on what the purpose of the conference is. So then also, how big is it going to be? All of those things are still up in the air.
Awesome. So let's move to Edgy. And Ray, maybe do you want to do your shading in? But since Matt Price also joined us, do a rich sketch of what you kind of already told us a little bit.
Yeah, it's pretty short. Just I'm coming from the web monitoring software side. We're still like pushing towards our milestones, but sort of have cautiously started reaching out to more developers. We were afraid of just putting out random calls because, especially for more junior people, we didn't have the capacity to give them the right support or mentorship, and we didn't want them to have like a lame experience with that. So We were reaching out to more senior devs, and also the fact that it looks like we're getting a little grant money, so we can look for volunteers as well as potentially paid work. So sort of outreach is sort of happening. Sometimes, we did talk to Gerben actually, which was great. Rob, I mostly listened in, Rob, and they went deep into web diffing, which was really interesting. And just nice to share knowledge. I don't know if he'll be a collaborator, but it was just great to share knowledge. And so, as more of that happens, you just want to make sure that the web monitoring team, product team, and data together is sort of in sync. And how can, as myself, as product manager, help those sort of communications and collaborations progress. And so that's just putting the seed out and the gesture out to sort of have a longer conversation with the group going forward.
Awesome. I feel like I've been sort of less active in Edgy the last couple of weeks, but I wanted to invite any other Edgy person to maybe give an update from our side over the last month, and if not, I could cobble something together.
I can't think of anything. I just came out of my class.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So I'll give a best attempt. We are still. This is sort of through TRU's support of Edgy. We're still waiting to hear back on whether or not we got that Compute Canada grant. I feel like maybe we're at the point where we should follow up, because that would kind of be another piece of infrastructure to maybe think about, or to be running a data together node for Edgy, and then that maybe could be a thing that some sort of product analysis could be done on. And otherwise, the archiving group has been fairly quiet. I know there's some potential collaborations in the works with other people, but I feel like I don't know if they can be publicly announced. I'm looking at Brendan to chime in.
Not public quite yet.
Okay. So this is sort of a step removed from Data Together, but I think really aligned with why we're interested in participating in Data Together. So where possible, I think our hope is to keep archiving work close to that. And if people are happy to, we can stop recording for a second and share the name, and Brendan could do the brief update. So why don't we do that? But actually, I can't stop the recording. I think you have to, Pakhan.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, going offline now. Oh, wait.
Maybe, 1 sec.
Psych.
Request recording permission from the meeting host.
I really like that this is all being recorded.
I might be able to. Hold on a second.
Thank you. Awesome, we're back. Whoa! It'd be cool if we were back and everyone was in a different place, but I don't think we have that ability. So just in the time we have left, we had sort of said this would be a 90-minute kind of a little more working meeting. There was 2 big areas we wanted to talk through and kind of reach at least a provisional decision to use going forward. The first was a call format for a more regular check-in. And the second was our decision-making, sort of a process for decision-making, recognizing that not everyone will be able to make a call. So kind of allowing for a mix of discussion and over a range of time that includes calls and async interaction. And so the way this had worked was that Brendan and I had kind of, we very recently slammed together a proposal, and Matt Zed and Pakhan, you both have thoughts about decision-making stuff, and I'm not sure here what the right way to proceed would be. Just to flag that we had I was thinking we could spend about 20 minutes a piece on those, and then the last 20 minutes kind of hit a couple key discussion topics that have come up. So the first one was the one that Liz had flagged, and so there's some prompts there. Then I think we should loop back on this product requirement analysis that you raised, Matt said. That sounds really exciting. Also thinking about if we need to, or if we have some further discussion about the licensing or MOU. And then so maybe we could talk about the doctoral research. So just that as all the things on our plate that we would like to cover. So yeah, do people have thoughts about, and maybe I'm looking at Matt Zed and Pakon to some degree, about the decision-making conversation?
We did not sync up.
We didn't, and I will take responsibility for that. You may have been messaging me about it, but Don and I did. It sounds like you have an RFC process for IPFS, which would be great if it's like really robust and has been trialed a lot. But Don and I did like quickly discuss before the call and have some notes that I just dropped them into the section now. So into the notes now. So if you, Matt said, if you want to, I don't know, do you feel like you would like to give a pitch first on the IPFS protocol labs process?
I'm not able to edit this document. Is there a reason why? Should I not be able to edit it?
The agenda or the
yeah, the agenda.
Because the agenda is in the data together folder, so everyone should be able to.
It's not. It's not letting me edit.
Switch it to Ken edit.
Oh wait, I'm logged in as the wrong. Sorry, because I want to paste a link to.
Oh, sorry.
Our.
Okay,
I was logged in as the wrong user. That was why. And
that's not intentional. It should be editable for everyone.
Here, well, I'm going to paste this link for now into the chat. So this is basically the IPFS project is cloning the RFC process that the Rust project uses, the Rust language uses to manage their work, which has been tested quite thoroughly. And it leverages GitHub pretty heavily, or especially Git, but also GitHub and the notion of pull requests. So I don't know if that's too Git-centric and GitHub-centric. It certainly would translate fine to GitLab. So it's not that it's vendor lock-in to GitHub, but it is still very Git-centric. It's very very much oriented around people who are comfortable with making code, making commits with Git, and commenting on pull requests. So that's something that I've been working on over the past month and will be working on over the next 2 months for the IPFS side of things. So if we wanted to use it, it would be easy to adapt it because we're already sort of hands deep in it. But it maybe doesn't fit. It might fit, might not. I would be curious what people think. And if you'd like me to describe how it works, I could do that.
For what it's worth, the what Don and I were talking about before still used GitHub issues, and it was still on GitHub. It wasn't necessarily editing documents in the repository, but it was very GitHub centric for now. And the thought was we could just change if the audience that we wanted to attract changed.
All right. Well, let me share my screen just for a second and show you let's look at the Rust RFCs. So Rust lang /RFCs. So this is on GitHub. They have a repository for their RFCs. RFC stands for request for comments. And then the landing page for that has this whole description about how the process works. And it has guidance for how to write a good RFC and how the RFC gets decided on. We would have to slightly tweak that. But the interesting thing is that the way you make a proposal is you submit a pull request to something that adds to this text folder. So I'm opening that up. So now you can see that there's a whole history of RFCs that people have submitted into their project and have been reviewed. And you could pick at random. There's sort of a template for how they're formatted. And the idea being an RFC getting merged into this repo means everyone agrees with what was proposed there. So it's still up to you to follow through and actually make it happen. But it at least gets that confirmation of we all agree, and we all agree on the proposal. It has a useful, one of the useful things is the way the template is structured, that you have a summary, then you give a couple paragraphs of motivation, and then you give a high level explanation of what you're proposing. You give a reference level of here's how to do it, here's the actual nitty gritty. And then it allocates space for discussing drawbacks, discussing the rationale and alternatives, and also for calling out unresolved questions, which is really useful, especially so in your first submission, So your PR of I'm submitting this RFC, you can call out, before we merge this, we need to answer X, Y, and Z. And then there's other things that like we're explicitly like okay with leaving this unresolved while moving ahead with this RFC. So that's basically the whole process. Like you take this template, you submit, well, even if you're not ready for the template, you could submit an issue saying, hey, I'm thinking of submitting an RFC on blah, and you could have some discussion. But once that comes to the point where you would actually propose something, you grab this template, you submit a new entry into that folder of RFCs, and you spell out this information for everyone to review, and then you review it and you either merge or don't. I'll stop sharing now so people can see each other. Matt and then PatCon.
I think it looks really cool. There are two thoughts. I think that using GitHub for now, that is the way that we have been organizing ourselves. Everyone in this call and every organization that is familiar with them. So I think GitHub sounds great. It leaves unresolved who merges, like what's the process by which the merge it takes place, and there must be things that are kind of outside the scope still of this, or maybe there aren't. I wonder if, in some way, for some things, this is a little bit heavy, or not. Those are my thoughts. But to me, it looks great. It looks really cool.
So I can respond straight to that one before we go to PatCon. The way that we're doing it with IPFS is that I created the repo for IPFS, and the first RFC is proposing that we use the RFC process. And that like as it is right now is basically a straight clone of the Rust one, but before it gets merged, there are actually going to be tweaks around who makes decisions and how the decision gets made so that it's specific to the IPFS crowd. And also one of the things that it spells out is that threshold of what is sufficiently complicated that it needs to be an RFC, that we would have to reword that part because the Rust one is like, it's all about like language changes and changes to the API is what the threshold is. And so we would need to reword those lines, but it would be relatively easy for us to start and then comment on that PR and tweak it before we merge that very first one. PatCon.
Yeah, just wondering how the voting mechanism is probably similar to Matt's questions around how do things get merged.
Yeah, we have not settled on a voting. Well, we're really, on the IPFS side, we're creating a structure that has the notion of a core group. And that core group, which is only about 4 people, ultimately gets to decide on an RFC, but they can also delegate responsibility for categories of RFCs to other groups. So it's actually a pretty centralized decision-making process. And that's what we're doing on the IPFS side, but that's not necessarily how we have to do it on the data together side. In fact, that's not how we should do it on the data together side. Done?
It looks really neat. I guess I think I have two questions. The first one is, I think we have I feel like the range of decisions we could conceivably make within data together might be broad, that it would be, there's something about framing it as an RFC which might promote a certain type of way of framing the problem. That's the only thing I'm thinking of around how we have conversations and kind of come together to try it and make a plan. That said, we don't have any structure, so I think we need something. And if I were to imagine, but I know so little about Pokemon, so this is a risky business. If I were to imagine what an RFC is, I feel like it's not the first stage. It's somewhere in the middle, middle to final form, not final form. I don't know. And I wonder if what we could think of is get us going and give us a record to not overly formalize if we find that there's unintended consequences. I don't know, but my suspicion is that might push us in a direction that in 2 months we might be oh, this isn't working for us. But these are hazy thoughts.
Yeah, this is RFCs. I mean, we definitely, part of what's driving the IPFS project to use RFCs is that we now have hundreds of committers and thousands of people interacting with our GitHub repos. So it's like called for at that scale, where this project is much smaller at this point. So doing something more nimble and minimal probably does make sense. Brandon and Pekka.
Yeah, I think the bones of it though make sense. Like generally, like some sort of. I think the things that strike me as really exciting here is two things that are shaken out. It's quite clear that the RFC process still leaves on the table the discussion about actually how decisions get made, which is interesting. The other thing that seems interesting here is we could strip that down to something really bare bones. But the thing that I think is very exciting is the sort of sequential record of thoughts that sort of allow us to understand how the project is developing over time. And to, even if someone needed to sort of dig into that log, however that exists, I think that sort of like core document that is evolving, that has a mechanism for distributed evolution is a really important thing that I think would be really nice to see. I completely agree that the RFC model might be too heavy-handed. So something in the middle would be good. I really like the property of like an evolving record. Yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, so just, I know Pakon, and then I see another hand. Could we, after those hands, I was wondering actually if we could share how Edgy does it, because we're using consensus. That might be a good example to also bring in. And then just think about, maybe having about 10 more minutes left or see where we're at. So sorry.
I think I'm next on Stack, and I think I saw Evan's hand go up at the same time as me, but just wanted to note that. Yeah, so we did, when Don and I were talking, we had kind of in there a bit of a like conversational phase in Slack as like being, part of it and welcome, like no need to go right to RFC. And the other thought was, I wonder whether we could kind of take a lot of the RFC process from them, but perhaps move it into like GitHub comments, which maybe would be a little less daunting for less technical folks. And finally, just wondering if we did go with the full RFC process, whether it would get in the way of moving to maybe a more inclusive platform at some point, whether it would be a little bit too locked into like pull requests and things. But I suppose it could port pretty well to Google Docs or something like that. But just it's in my mind. So yeah, that's all. Thanks.
Liz, and then Eben and then me.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I'm interested to hear what Don says about the Edgy process, because I see it as, I'm guessing it's more of a verbal and like a sequential facilitation of conversation stages that is probably not nearly documented with this structure at all, but then it really would help have the discussion, which is a gap. When I look at the documentation for the RFC, it's incredible about documentation itself, and then it just says, sometimes discussions happen. But in my experience, it's the actual mechanics among people in discussion format where like major shifts could take place. And maybe maybe there's a genius here in that it is lightweight in terms of requiring less from people to interact with each other. If you could just document your point thoroughly, hitting all these notes in an RFC in a lightweight manner, the whole project can continue to evolve. And I do respect that. But I would just ask ourselves, like, who do we think is gonna be talking like this? That kind of documentation burden, that's a killer. I literally know nobody who is not already involved in the tech world who could stomach this. Yeah, so I don't know. That's it. Excited to hear what the Edgy protocol is.
Yeah, I was just going to echo that like, I think if we can keep it as simple as possible, it's probably to our benefit, depending on like what our audience is that's coming in. I think we are fairly all technical, but people that might want to get involved might be turned off by like that level of documentation, maybe.
Matt, were you going to give the rundown of how it works at Edgy? PatCon?
Is it me? I mean, I probably know more than any of the other edgy people here, but we have a steering committee, and it works by consensus -1, and it has a quorum system. So a certain minimum number of people have to show up. Of those people who show up, if more than one person objects to a proposal, then that proposal does not pass. And I think we try to have a lot of the discussion async, and then, but then there are kind of crucial synchronous moments where decisions actually get made. Can I comment on the edgy process also, and just describing it? I think that consensus works really great where interests are extremely well aligned, but it becomes brittle when interests start to diverge. And I feel like, despite being kind of a hippie, like skeptical about writing it in, because I've seen groups kind of devolve into a sort of paralysis when consensus stops being easy to achieve. So like groups work really well for a while, and then consensus stops being easy, and then you have the thing where like the most stubborn person always wins, and everybody ends up resentful. And so it's kind of hard to finish a thing. So that's my worry about consensus.
I'm just going to do a time check and say we were hoping for maybe a couple more minutes. This is a much larger conversation, and I don't want to cut people off, but maybe after the people who had their hands up go, we just want to think about if we have enough information to start to draft like an approach or something.
PatCon then, right? I guess.
Cool. Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think RFC or comment process to me feels okay at this point, and I just wanted to like kind of shine a light on an alternative approach that maybe we could consider later that perhaps would address Matt's concerns. And I think Liz would be familiar with it. Some consultation methods like around focus conversation that I guess there's been some attempts to like bring it into like a lightweight online process, and I can share the links in chat for later. It's probably too much for now, but just something that might seem could help us with this later. Yeah.
Do you have a high-level name for that process, PatCon?
Sure. Yeah. Let me make sure I'm not still muted. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, okay. It's called Focused Conversation Method. It's from some academic group in in Alberta, Canada, and it's also known as ORID, O-R-I-D, and that's kind of an acronym that talks about the main thing. The thrust is that it's like building on layers of discussion. Like you discuss all the facts together at first, and then when you have the facts clarified, like in the definitions of the terms you're using, then you kind of bring the feelings into the conversation, and everyone's talking about feelings, and then you throw in all your ideas about possible solutions, and then you come to a decision, kind of like layered approach. But it only fits for a certain scope or scale of decision. But
I mean, I'm not sure exactly why you qualified it in that way. Does it only work for a certain scope or scale?
I think it could be a little heavy if it were just applied to every single decision. Maybe not. It's kind of, I guess it hasn't been tried yet in a space like this.
So I just wanted to quickly add to something that Matt was talking about, just from my observations of Edgy and their decision making with consensus -1. I definitely agree with his idea that when everyone's basically really aligned, it helps. We've also talked about it within Edgy. It also helps. It's like the consensus -1 is also a challenge when everyone's remote, because it's easier to lose alignment when people aren't in the same room together often. And the other thing I want to add is part of Edgy's steering committee challenge is its size. So it's 11 people. And so reaching and maintaining consensus and sort of alignment among 11 people that are mostly distributed is challenging. And I'm not sure how big the decision-making body of Data Together will be, but it's something to consider, because sometimes it's just, you want to have everyone have input and feel like they're included, but you also want to be able to be nimble enough, especially in the beginning, to make decisions at a reasonable time period.
So my sense, and then Matt said, happy to sort of, I feel like I'm like overly facilitating this section, is that we have a few alternatives, but it sounds like there's like general areas where we might have enough to kind of put together a proposal. Does that reflect other people's, like, can we just do a quick check-in? It seems like there might be, the other thing I'm hearing though is that we're talking about something provisional or something for now versus the future. So could I suggest like we define could we like just make sure we like have a shared, like, this is what we think we're adopting this decision-making thing to like process to do right now? Maybe that's like a big ask, and then have that help someone kind of take this together and submit a proposal for us to discuss at the next one, and or ideally beforehand. Because it sounds like my take on it, but I would be welcome, Matt and others, for your thought, is that we might be looking for something that's a little bit more streamlined, recognizing that we're smaller, identifying possible ways for it to grow in the future into something maybe more like fully fledged RFC style, looking at ORID or these other modes. We're kind of flagging that we want to be inclusive about how we have this process, so that should like be a key priority for how we structure it. And then we would want to define key things, which I think would be true anyways, about like the number of people required, kind of like what a discussion process would look like, etc. Like it sounds like we have a good sense of information, like to help us like build that process.
Yeah, the one thing that I think is missing is just where are we going to, so if we take that, so in my head, the thing I would reach for is, partially just because I'm already in the process of doing it, take the RFC proposal that we're using for IPFS, tweak it to match what we just discussed in this call, and then discuss from there to get at least something that's framed as a proposal that we can all say, yes, we agree. And then we might end up not using that whole RFC process to it, but it at least gives us a framing for landing this conversation and getting the decisions expressed clearly of we consider these options, we like this option, we're definitely doing this, we're definitely not doing that, and like give it some structure. Are people okay with using that structure for now, using that the template RFC that I already have?
I have a question about that. As I read the RFC, it's maybe more explicit about who makes decisions and less explicit about who facilitates. And I feel like we're in a mode where we need facilitation. Mm-hmm. So that's why like the stretch of the RFC seems to not be an efficient approach. But if you could see, I think it's, if you could see how to do it, and I'm open to it. I think what we have on the table is like, we're going to have a lot of people from a lot of different perspectives in a moment of broadening a movement where many people are going to try to articulate what is important to them. Mm-hmm. And facilitating that is it's very important. And I wouldn't think that we could move forward on a protocol that was like fundamentally around like hyper burdening everyone with like complete written expression of what they mean without help supporting them with a facilitator.
I'm trying, in the interest of time, I'm trying to figure out how to accommodate that perspective in a way that feeds into what we do between now and the next call. Is it that we set out a draft that's based on the notes from this call, and then that leaves space for you to tease that apart of what facilitation looks like? And like, what are or what can we do to accommodate that? Pat's hand up and Brendan's.
Yeah, I guess I just wanted, what I recall from the last meeting was that one of the central points was having a way to make decisions in between sessions. And so, I think like facilitation is super important and we should work to get that in like as soon as possible. It could be very hard to do in an asynchronous way, which I think was a high priority. and just floating that thought. Like, I also agree facilitation important, but I wonder, it seems like it's a thing to learn how to do asynchronously and kind of experiment with, possibly. And the other thing is, I guess what I think I was hearing from Matt was whether we could kind of treat this first decision, which is like deciding the proposal, as a weird context. We just pull wholesale the RFC process, but potentially like in the very first iteration of it, we strip it all down and turn it into something else, but just as a way to work in between calls. And yeah, I guess that seemed like an okay approach.
Yeah, and I just totally want to leave space to add to that if needed. But I was going to say, I think our meeting conversation can kind of actually inform this a little bit. And so if maybe what we could do is stop here, have the meeting discussion, and see if one of our topics might actually be how we do discussion and facilitation in the context of RFCs. Or Don, does that make sense?
Yeah, so just to provide context, we've had a weekly call, and we were hoping to rethink what that format could be, to not focus solely on technical implementation details. So while it wasn't intended as sort of a thing that everyone had to show up to every time, and we weren't imagining that there would be decisions made there that like you had to have been there in that narrow window, that it could be a space to help brainstorm ideas or shape things before they got to a decision level. So I could definitely see elements of a decision-making process kind of be workshopped or discussed there. Critically, facilitation. I think it would be okay if we moved on, but if it might also not, we might go through that conversation and that doesn't address this. So I just want to maybe, like maybe Matt said, sorry, I feel like you have like half a thought and I've like just started a sentence right at the beginning of each of them.
Yeah, I was operating under the assumption that we need something that, like, based on prior discussions, that we need something that accommodates asynchronous decision making, partially because forcing synchronous decision making is exclusionary, because you have to choose a time and that the call will happen. So you're excluding people for whom that's an inconvenient time. And so I was operating under that assumption. So if we're like going back to that not being okay, that's that changes a lot. Is that Matt or Liz? Is that what you're proposing? Is that like focusing on an asynchronous solution is actually insufficient, and is not accommodating what we need as a project?
Can I share my first thought to that? Which is, I don't think facilitation only encompasses synchronous conversation. And so what I interpreted and took to mean from that is there's a lot of importance in having providing facilitation work kind of throughout a process, which might include elements of like a space to discuss together on a call, but also be wide enough to have an async process and not have sort of like there be a very narrow time window being like the limiting factor for a decision.
So maybe it's that the way to incorporate Liz's point is that in the proposal that we float using this template, one of the open questions that has to be resolved in order for us to merge it is we have to spell out some sort of provisions that accommodate facilitation. That like, how will facilitation occur? And then that lets us asynchronously brainstorm on what is the right solution there to provide the right facilitation. Matt Price?
I mean, I think that is useful. I think there's like something very different about, say, a GitHub issue than writing one of those RFCs. Where like, so like a GitHub issue has a lower barrier, I think. And that could be a form of facilitation in the sense that, or for form of facilitated conversation where there might be persons whose task it is to ensure that to move conversation along in issues or something like that. So that could be like part of the way that we resolve things.
Yeah, I actually want to, so I want to like write up, I want to what I'm wanting to reach for is do the exercise of actually taking what we have from these notes and putting them into a modified version of that RFC so that it can reflect all of this discussion. We might end up deciding not to use that approach, but at least we'll have made explicit what the proposal was. Because I also want to throw in, like, Lumio is a great tool that is more specifically designed to accommodate facilitated discussions, and we can potentially figure out how to weave that in and whether to weave that in. And we don't need to discuss that right now on this call. Like, we can just throw it into the asynchronous discussion. Liz?
I wanted to put boundaries around my previous topic, comment, because I may have leapt forward imagining a time when data together calls are including like new people who are trying to join this conversation, new individuals, new partner organizations with additional agendas that they may not see, they have hopes of, but they may not see reflected yet. I just wanted to say that because I would feel confident that our group here, having already worked together for half year or more, we could, I think we're cool with this, but I'm also, the boundaries of my previous comment were that I was assuming we were on a track to bring more people in ASAP, and in which case I would think it wasn't enough. And so that's what I meant.
All right. Yeah, I think I can work with that. I think I can assemble from these notes in this discussion something that sets us on the right trajectory to like take step one and like take further steps from that get us like rolling towards something we'll all at least feel we can participate in the like crafting it to be what we need.
Okay, great. So we have, just thinking about things in the future, we have March 12th, sorry, I always do this between February and March, as the next coordination meeting. So I would hope by then maybe we have a proposal and could have reviewed it. And so I would actually suggest this, feeding into this call format conversation, this might be a great way to trial that. And so just because we're running over, PatCon, can we park whatever, great, sorry. Because we sort of spent longer on that chunk, but I think it's important. But I think the call format one might be more modest in scope than my agenda title led it to be. So hopefully that will be a shorter conversation. So Brendan, do you maybe want to do a bit of an intro, and just to let everyone know, we have a written proposal at the bottom of the agenda called Data Together Call Format Proposal. You
should totally read it because I'm basically gonna. Well, no, you don't.
I could do a succinct version. I'm confused.
Go for it.
Okay, sorry. We kind of just said here are kind of what we saw as objectives of like kind of, you know, what a more regular check-in aside from a coordinating call, which this is, would give us. And keeping in mind that sort of the parameters were it was brief, once a week. And so kind of the goal would maybe be to check into ongoing work, surface larger issues, but not really be a place where we're making decisions. Also maybe provide a venue for a first stage of feedback when ideas are being developed or kind of start to flag important conversations. And then also just like give us a touchstone place for us to meet. So the basic gist I'll say, and then maybe give people a moment to absorb text, is thinking of sort of similar to the community call and the previous one, just do a round of intros and like a very bullet point check-in, but rotate someone to lead, almost like sort of round table, but basically just a way to talk about one focused issue for that call. And some of the examples of it could be like, just a reflection or a check-in on, say, this decision-making process. Maybe like I have a bug in my, I don't know where, I really want this website copy updated. So like that would maybe being like, hey, let's talk about the website. But I think maybe coming out of that would be potentials for decisions, but kind of not have only the members on the call be involved in that. If it rose to the level of decision, because there's some degree of things that might not, but it's just to kind of raise themes. And then, yeah, at this point of for faster moving conversations, you know, we already have a GitHub we have a Slack channel, and we flagged that we want to have a broader conversation about communication channels. I see sort of like a call as only one piece of that, as well as these quarterly coordinating meetings, and that we should discuss and hopefully at the next meeting, like just see where it fits into the constellation of our communication strategy. So maybe just to give people a minute, 2 minutes to spend time looking at that and not listening to me, and then discussion.
I'm not clear on which document are we reading. There's just a lot of links.
Just scroll to the bottom of the agenda. It's at the very last page. The title of the page is Data Together Call Format Proposal.
Ah, okay.
I guess my comments are I like switching hosts. That's great because it gives people an opportunity to present and also run an agenda. And what we do at work a lot is if you don't make the meeting, you by default become the host for the next meeting. So I don't know if that's something that we could do. I think we do have to keep it pretty tight. And I think that's probably the host job, that if there are longer discussions, either have like a second time slot or decide whether to move that to the Slack channel. And we should probably define like what kind of the topics that meets. I don't know if that's a time thing or a topic thing or what, just because we're all pretty busy this semester.
Yeah, let's, those are great thoughts to flag. We'll just spend maybe a couple more minutes absorbing and then check in. Maybe one more minute.
Thumbs up if you've read it. Let's go.
Okay. Yeah, so what are people's thoughts? Matt said.
To me, it's, I like the question that looms for me is who would be doing the convening and prompting of what's going to be the roundtable topic for next week's call, and like making sure that gets broadcast, because like we want to give people the option to opt in or opt out, and so then there's just this overhead of like propagating that information in sufficient time that people know what's happening, and it would be good to spell that out.
Just as a quick response, our thought was that at the end of the call, that at least next week's would be set up. So it would kind of be like a handoff from the person who was facilitating that call.
And you just send out an email or something, or some sort of announcement. Yep.
Or maybe you could also have like a checklist document for the host, whether, I don't know whether it's this week's host or next time's host that is the responsible agent, but you would just delineate that and move through the checklist when you're the moderator.
Do we store agendas somewhere?
We did have a running one we do have all of these ones in the Google Drive, and then I think the tech stand-up ones were just were in HackMD.
Yes, and I have all of those. They're like chained, so you can go previous meeting.
Yeah,
it's a Merkle deck. Sorry. Cool.
PackCon, sorry.
Yeah, I didn't see this so much reflected in the notes themselves, but a comment that I heard from you, Dawn, when you were talking about decision making in there. I guess I just wanted to flag that it would be wonderful if don't know. I'm just thinking of an analogy to a similar process where that culminates in meeting in person, and a lot of impassioned and convincing things can be said in the in-person part. And the thought would be that it would be great to, if there's decision making involved, to before the meeting gather lots of like facts and feelings and have them, I don't know, available, because those who really care about the issue can kind of pore over those and like prepare to assimilate them. And you know, the moment of speaking is like a powerful one. So maybe I'm not saying anything that anyone has any problems with, but just wanted to put that out there, like gathering information before the meeting and then having a conversation and work toward decisions based on that, instead of starting a decision in the in-person meeting and then gathering things later. If that makes sense, but maybe that was preemptive.
Are you getting that if you're promoting the next roundtable topic at the end of the meeting? Like if you're promoting next week's roundtable topic at the end of the current week's meeting, are you getting that? Hopefully people are thinking about questions.
Yeah, I think the sort of tacit expectation here is that we're sort of having a rolling framework of understanding how we, and Don and I in conversation, we're talking about a minimum of a week's heads up. So a minimum of a week means that when you're having one call, the next call's topic is either set or nearly set.
And I'm sorry to maybe be a little bit pushing things forward, but just given timing, to Jeff's point, in the absence of a decision-making structure, we will have to default to this narrow time slice. Can we do a check-in on if people are okay with adopting this? And we could also just do a reflection in our March call, so that would give us a month of having done this. So are we okay to adopt this for the following month and then see how it goes? Okay, cool. It is adopted. I feel like it was my make it so moment and I bungled it. Oh, okay. So the next thing is discussion topics, and we had said 20 minutes for that and just maybe 5 minutes for wrap up. Is it okay if we run about 5 minutes over? I think some people had some drop off around 6:30. I just want to know how much time we should budget here. So could we go to run 5 minutes over? And then I'll unfortunately be quite strict to time. Okay. So first, and maybe Liz, are you okay with me handing it off, or I'm happy to sort of introduce it? But I think in the query licensing conversation, but also other conversations, I think a really important and kind of challenging open question was brought up to sort of think about how decentralization can be of use to communities in precarious situations, but kind of maybe trying to untangle a little bit if kind of what we're saying when we're saying decentralized approaches for community stewardship, if we're kind of necessarily getting, if we're getting there just by using the word decentralization. So kind of unpacking some of those assumptions or trying to make sure that we're really explicit with it. And I think maybe as a prompt, that would be really sort of was kind of what got me thinking too, was this notion of how can we set up decentralization to ensure justice? So in the case of community stewardship, how would it be just community stewardship? And this is definitely open, but I think too probably feels like an ongoing conversation that connects with a lot of EDGI's recent concerns around environmental data justice. So not trying to say we're gonna resolve this now, but just to sort of, I think, open that as a conversation. And I would invite, anyone. Liz?
It's been so great working with everyone and learning about the decentralized web. And I was having a conversation with Nick yesterday where he said, is there irony in the fact that our efforts to bolster and reinforce regulations over the environment, to resist the deconstruction of a healthy regulatory framework, that we, across many different types of projects and over many different phases, are, at least in this regard, embracing a completely unregulatable, decentralized approach. And we had been talking about like how it was pretty much like, you know, I had said that I felt quite clear about that this approach was a boost to expanding how many people could hold the government data commons. I felt pretty clear about that, but that I was starting to get some major skin crawl over some of the language we had about that simply the existence of a decentralized web as an option would lead to reduced precarity for communities. And so I guess I just wanted to say, I'm really looking forward to having that conversation with you guys and, you know, your additional collaborators who aren't here yet, or other people who care about this who we haven't met yet. But that I thought we should maybe focus on the statement to partners, at least the MOU, and potentially the statement to partners, and away from the kind of the aspirations about the community layer, which I think are quite unformed. Yeah, and that's what I would love to hear you guys' thoughts on.
I saw Matt Zed and Brennan at the same time.
That one.
I can just say this is like at the core of why I wanted this collaboration to exist as a collaboration with the Big Tent, is specifically to draw lots and lots of people into exactly that conversation, and to have it in a big way and ship examples, like descriptions, documentation, and examples of how to do it and what it looks like. So I'm totally in.
Yeah, and for my piece, I think you know, we're trying to build some of those examples, and in conversations with, particularly in chat I had with Dawn a little while ago, she sort of mentioned how she thinks this is sort of a design challenge, like a human-centric sort of design challenge, and I'm really excited to sort of like explore that a little bit, and I'd actually like to see us engage in some of that, where participatory design as a framework for understanding some of these problems, or at least advancing our understanding of these problems, if not necessarily solutions driven, but thought driven.
Matt P?
I just think it kind of hits the nail on the head. It's so easy to talk about, you know, technical possibilities, and so hard to change the world. You know, you can change the world, and then, I mean, like Facebook and Google change the world, and they look up and it's the same world in a lot of ways. Like the things that they change may not be the things that matter. So I think this is really important and it's going to be very hard. And I think we need to think about, like, you know, hopefully we'll get somewhere with technology where we can imagine what a possible solution looks like. But when we get there, then we have to really start the actual hard work, you know, and it's super exciting and a little daunting when I think about it.
Yeah, I will say, just for the record, that I think this is the crowd to do it. It needs to get bigger, but I think the people in this room are very, very well equipped to take on some of that stuff.
Well, yeah, and I also would extend of, like, in terms of thinking about who to invite to be involved next, they should be organizations and individuals who really want to be engaged in that conversation, and like filter in that way, both proactively seeking out and also saying, maybe you're not right for this collaboration. Is like this would be a strong filter.
I just would like to invite people who haven't shared their thoughts, if they'd like to, also no obligation, and then maybe just make us revisit the one other sort of second half of Liz's prompt, because I think that'd be good to just also spend a bit of time on before moving forward. So yeah, if anyone has some initial thoughts they want to share. Go, Jess.
Hello. I was just going to chime in and say, just kind of +1 to what Dawn was alluding to and what's going on in environmental data justice. And I think you're trying to embark on a mapping project at the moment to figure out where the kind of intersection of other data justice projects intersect with environmental data justice. And I think the work that's going on there, I think is really applicable to these conversations about who to bring in to the loop around data together. But also I would say, I was listening in, Liz, on your comments the other day, and I commented in the Slack, and I was really like moved by them, I have to say. So I'll leave it there, but that's me.
Yeah, so I'll maybe just share mine briefly and then turn to the second part of Liz's. I also felt like this was a powerful question, like the sort of very succinctly articulated one, and something that I didn't want to lose in the act of like trying to implement something, which I think Brendan or maybe someone else alluded to, that tension of like when you start making a thing, it feels like some form of technological determinism creeps in, and I'm like really wary of that. And I actually would just flag too that in terms of thinking about how we would go about working together or talking about this together, this is where I see facilitation of like at a broader like level, like understanding it over a period of time would be really helpful to try and get at uncovering some of other people's feelings and thoughts, and maybe getting toward answers or approaches or ways forward. And so the thing that Liz had said that maybe brings to bear on something concrete, so this is me being like the seed of a to-do that I have to find, is thinking about what an initial MOU or partnership needs to cover, so the scope of it. And just to flag, because this is a long-standing thing, I think from EDGY's side, there's some degree of just ensuring that we are not putting at risk our fiscal sponsor, Public Lab, and in partnerships that we enter into. So that to me feels like, we want to do this with care in a way that, doesn't potentially harm our sponsor. But I feel like that's not incompatible with understanding maybe how we think about initial stages of an MOU or what a partnership agreement is, that also isn't like us encoding or committing or overly specifying things too soon. Pakon?
I don't know. I'm not sure if this fits, but it is kind of springboarding. The thought is like, is there a litmus test for the sorts of partnerships that feel healthy around the conversation about decentralization? And this is like totally this is spinning out of a conversation that Liz and I had. But just the thought of whether there's this idea that some folks believe in decentralization kind of in the spirit of grassroots organizing, where it's like, it's because you have faith in people and you want to take apart a thing and give it to people because you believe in them. And then there's another kind of vein of decentralization or enthusiasm for decentralization, which is like, there's this big thing that's made of people and we don't trust them. So we're going to take it away and like give it to the code or give it to some decentralized thing, which can't be corrupted like people can. And it's like rooted in a lack of faith in people. And yeah, I just wonder whether that is like the basis of any sort of litmus around like what the good partnerships might be and the alignment with different groups might be. Just maybe for an MOU or something.
I want to just flag that in August we had said we wanted to start a reading group to like think about different. I just feel like this is like we were on the right track months ago, but we lost it. I don't know. I think there's maybe something there about untangling or like there's so much to unpack in all of these things. And I read that MIT report on decentralization that came out in August. It's like 120 pages, but I think about it all the time. The executive summary is quite short, so just to flag, you don't actually have to read it all. Yeah, like, I mean, it seems like there's this thing where we have all these questions, and maybe there's a way to guide answering them and support that by looking at examples or looking at, I have to say this, looking at articles and document and reports. Yeah, and we had already flagged thinking about a reading group as an approach or something that might be helpful to us to understand, stewardship governance strategies.
As long as one of us gets to impersonate Oprah.
I only think of that bee emoji.
Could I get a clarification of, like, Liz, how would you frame, so what is the second half? What is the challenge that you're posing, that we're discussing now? How do you frame it in your head?
So it would be for any aspirations, much less any claims, that the decentralized web is of use to like smaller subsets of people than like communities, which communities is a very slippery term here. But different purposes than making the library that doesn't burn for government data. And I do have a number of prompts here. I think that helpfully came out over, through conversation with many of you, including Don. To halfway start explaining, like, what is it that we don't see in decentralization? It's because the idea that to get stronger, we would first atomize ourselves is counter to all of community organizing practice. When you start with nothing, or when you start at a disadvantage, you look to each other, you form bonds, you recognize common struggle, you listen, and you begin to form an action plan, and you start to hold things in common. And just the holding of data, and there's a thank you, Environmental Data Justice Group, hopping in with the quote, the past 20 years of data activism shows that just possessing data without understanding our resources alone doesn't yield justice. And so when you talk about like holding resources, we usually talk about, holding things that have, other sorts of value. And as far as I can tell, all of this decentralized web runs on private hardware. And so there, it's a much different ownership model. Yeah, so for the patterns that decentralization breaks, what is its answer? Much less the entire concept that people would choose to, for the good of everybody, create regulation. The entire thing that like that entire paradigm. Sorry, I think my internet connection is unstable. But, I think the trendy libertarianism, a lot as an answer for a stable society, there's inequities, there is still some against which advocacy groups can work towards achieving equity, and that is a centralized government. And so, long story short, what's our theory of change? How is a counter infrastructure that's decentralized, running on private equipment, going to decrease precarity?
So glad for the recording.
I mean, I could give my the way I usually speak to that is that, well, there's a couple key things I tend to talk about. There's a matrix of risk and value, and surfacing that matrix of what's at risk and what is valuable has to be done in a distributed way. That currently only a few parties are even in a position to measure that or express it, when really it needs to be expressed through people's actions. But what that looks like in terms of, I don't see, so I see the flag of we should not be atomizing. I don't see this decentralization movement about people decentralizing. I see it about being about people and groups of people taking possession of the data that they rely on or that they've created. So it's about claiming possession and putting a grounding under yourself to be capable of possessing, which sometimes requires coordination so that you can share possession in aggregate of something that you don't have the resources to possess on your own. And that's where there is a role for institutions like libraries and archives to step up and be providing the resources of institutions into that network as peers who are reinforcing the other peers on the network's ability to retain possession of the things that they rely on. And so it's sort of, there's like a spectrum of, you have these robust institutions, but they exist to actually facilitate groups of people and their patrons possessing things and retaining possession of it. So that's the language. And so then I also reduce it down to this language of possession, and then also participation, which is where you get into the regulatory thing of participation, as in, am I participating in this pin set? Am I participating in helping to preserve this if I can, right? And if I can't, maybe I can ask someone else to possess on my behalf. And then there's also participation in the sense of what you will explicitly not repeat, what you don't want on your network, the information that you actually, if I see it, I will destroy it on my machine. Malware, like any other forms of information that you and your community see as being harmful. And that like is also a regulatory pattern that actually a decentralized infrastructure enables a more like participatory form of enforcement of that regulation. So those are a lot of the talking points I tend to go at in this domain.
Brendan, I know you said you wanted to jump on sec, but we are quite over, so I'm wondering if it's okay, unless it's like super burning, if we wait, because I think there's so much. Yeah, I want to talk about. Me too. Like, I think that's super important. And I feel like Liz liked a lot of really great considerations around like commons. And we were talking about like data commons. And so this language has been brought up. And to me, these types of topics could be, we could trial using the call, the 30-minute call in between to start to try and unpack it before the next meeting and see whether that kind of gets us somewhere, or maybe it's not enough time. I feel like these are huge conversations and we should all be in the same room together for hours. Hopefully that didn't sound terrifying. So I'm gonna park the licensing and MOU conversations for now, but there are things that we need to think about. I'm glad we're meeting in March. And I wanted to just maybe circle back really quickly to the IPFS product requirement analysis point. Matt said, I mean, if you think we should wait on it, we can wait, but that seemed like maybe an interesting possibility, and we kind of currently just want to check in if people feel like this is a good time for it, or whether it fits having, now at the end of this meeting.
Wait, how much I was reading people's comments as you think, what is the thing that might not be?
The product requirement analysis, you said.
Yeah, as long as it even sounds vaguely like, yeah, that sounds great, then I'll just propose that be what this woman works on, and it might not get cleared, but it probably will.
So do people think that sounds valuable, interesting, great? So this would be looking at the existing data together reference implementation.
Yep.
Awesome. Cool. So I think we've lost our note takers, but we're saying we're going ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, we're doing it. It's called Reform.
My notes are terrible. So then the last part to talk about is the EDGI member doctoral research. As I think has been raised in Slack, probably mostly, but actually a bunch of us are doctoral students on this call. But yeah, I'm looking at you, Jeff. But Jess and Britt are EDGI members who are also kind of in the research fieldwork stage and perhaps writing, I shouldn't speak for your research, apologies, of their dissertation, and have both approached EDGI around, focusing on some aspect of it. And I think while there's so some of that is like connected to edgy archiving work. It also is not so easily contained to just an organization that's edgy. So just to say how do we think about that in the context of what's happening with data together? And this is just also to flag, like when edgy kind of went through a process, it took a few meetings. So we had quite long conversations, perhaps informed by many people also being academics. So I'm not saying we have to make a super decision today, but just to maybe open that and then turn it to Jess and or Britt, if that would be okay, to just maybe give a bit of background. So I should maybe say one person. I'm just going to say Jess.
Cool. I don't know, Britt, if you want to go first. I don't really mind. I think your project with Data Together is probably more formatted and fully formed and thought through than mine. I think ultimately I'll probably mostly be focusing on edgy, but I think I raised with Dawn in some Slack conversations around my concern around just making sure that everybody was aware that I am doing research on edgy, and obviously there's overlap with Data Together and projects, and I want to, see where that takes me. But I can pass around my, the various documents that I produced for the edgy MOU, which might be helpful in kind of getting people understanding what the boundaries are of what I'm looking at, which I think would be helpful. But I'm also aware of time, so I won't give you my whole PhD thesis rundown at this moment in time. But yeah, I'll drop the documents in Slack. Everybody can see them. I'll hand it over to Britt. Cheers.
Okay, so for me, real quick, I'm only looking at Data Together. And the way that it's sort of worked out with everyone that I've talked to in the various iterations of talking with them is that I would get permission from the sort of three overarching groups, so Query, Edgy, and Protocol Labs, for their sort of organizational support to study their involvement with Data Together, however that takes shape. And I have gotten support from Brendan at Query and from the steering committee at Edgy. I'm still waiting for Protocol Labs, support with everything. It's okay. I understand. And so, yeah, I think I'll drop the MOU. I can't remember exactly all of the details of so whenever I talk to individuals, obviously there's a consent form. When I'm sitting in on meetings, I'm just taking notes and announcing at the beginning of the meeting that I'm a PhD student, taking notes on, Data Together. And so, yeah, without getting into the details again and, in favor of keeping things short, I'll just drop the MOU. I don't know. I think that answers most of the questions that were asked, so.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go Brendan and then Pat.
Yeah, I just point out that I think we have a lot of expectations of working in a transparent public forum. And so personally, I think I'm totally cool with you guys auditing the stuff with the obvious caveats that things we say off the record, maybe those could stay in confidence. But beyond that, I mean, I'm personally, I'm not going to speak for the community, but I'm totally okay with you guys using anything in our public Slack channels as fodder for research and discovery.
I guess I'm not familiar with how PhD work works, but it's reminding me of a conversation I had yesterday with my brother, who is very interested in journalism and podcasts and how he's really interested in consent-based storytelling. And he just brought up an interesting point that at official media outlets, you're allowed to run the raw materials by people for consent, but you're not actually allowed to let them see or participate in the final writing because that would disrupt journalistic integrity. And so I'm just wondering, is there anything like that for academic work? Is there the idea that we can give the raw materials, but are we participants in the actual synthesis process, or do we have any say in that process? Or
I'll speak to that really quickly. It depends on your institutional review board approval that you get through your university. And if you specify that, hey, I'm going to give quotes back, or I'm going to sort of share back with the group that I'm studying, that's one sort of mode of, allowing them to participate, within the IRB's eyes. And then you can also, sort of make it more open and collaborative as well. And then they have to go through the process of reviewing it or saying, hey, that's too much, within the context of your project, this is not going to work, or, we're going to sort of make you walk that back a little bit. But yeah, I guess, does that answer your question?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like, sorry, I should have done a better job of framing. I just also to say maybe from Edgy's perspective, I think that came out of the conversations was sort of trying to understand, like, also all of the nuanced ways that a group's story gets told, and how that happens in an academic research context, and something that was flagged by Edgy members, also has to do with if it's a young group, like, are there challenges or potential risks with, like, how you tell a story, and so I think there's as part of a process, what Edgy would request and has requested would be some sort of, like, MOU that would kind of be something that every party agreed to around, like, how some of the parameters for research, understanding things like consent, thinking about a way that maybe, because in some cases research can be seen and experienced as extractive, like, so trying to avoid some of those challenges, and I think if that feels like it fits with data together, everyone data together wise through the coming months, then making sure that we have all of those at a point where everyone agrees on would be important. I mean, I think the other thing to flag, and then sorry, Liz, is that there's a lot of time constraints, and especially on you as a researcher side. So I don't know, and I'm conscious of us running over. If you briefly could maybe just type in the chat or something about what if you know of, like, timelines and stuff, and then, like, turn to Liz, and then maybe we could just think about wrapping the meeting up right now. I know that feels like a bit of a cliffhanger.
Great. If I get to say, Public Lab has had several embedded PhD researchers over its lifespan, and several dissertations have already been written now. And so we're used to this. And I totally agree with Dawn's points. And I also wanted to pull out that there's the opportunities to co-author articles, maybe smaller articles, faster articles that come out. Because a lot of the people in these initiatives, like, who gathered to make Public Lab happen, who gathered to make Data Together happen, it is also a way of writing through practice. We make, and the maker academic interaction has been less understood, but essentially, like, by coming together to make this new way of being, it is writing a theory and is putting it into practice, and it's nice to have a chance to actually all of us use words and write about it, in an article, so people can co-author and not just be studied.
So I just maybe want to say, do people have a parting thought on that? And so kind of where I think we're at is maybe another round of just checking in with individual organizations. I think I just missed a hand. I'm sorry, I did a weird, like, look away. No? Okay, so just as the quickest summary is that we have a call that will be on Mondays at 5 p.m. for 30 minutes for the next 4 weeks, or 3 weeks, and then we'll have another one of these calls. I will be responsible for queuing up the first one and setting a topic, which will be done maybe tomorrow. Unless someone has a burning topic, let me know. We have an upcoming thing that we didn't talk about. I'm really sorry that Matt Price raised, which is we were at kind of some interest. We got recontacted if we were interested in potentially applying to host an open web fellow So we would have to apply for it. There would still be that process. But Edgy could potentially be a host organization for a Mozilla Web Fellow. And is that something where Data Together could be a really interesting place for a Web Fellow to be who's hosted at Edgy? I think the answer is yes, but the deadline is Friday. So, so as with everything, it will be a bit of a rush. And I would maybe just drop, I'll sort of ask if we schedule a separate call for that. I think we were talking about chatting on Wednesday, Matt. I'm looking at you. So that's a thing that I wish I had forefronted. I'm so sorry. And we'll have a quick conversation about that today. Unfortunately, I have to leave like right now, but if people who are interested can stay, I don't think anyone can. It could happen after this. And I think those are the main where we're heading. And I'll post a summary of the notes and kind of just flag some of the ongoing parts from the discussion topics that we had in the last third of the meeting. Great. I appreciate getting to see you all. Bye. And I'll put the chat log in the bottom. That was a weird end.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, you guys. Nice to see you.
Bye all.
I don't know why I said that. That was